the problem is about
Mm-hmm.
expectations. Okay, as
Right.
founders, and I have been in that boat, unquestionably. When
Mm-hmm.
you're pitching to an investor, the investor often
Mm-hmm.
has his own thought process. He has his own biases. They have their own set of
Mm-hmm.
experience, and
True.
they sometimes, as a founder, you sometimes start saying what they want to hear, okay? Because you want
Right.
them to invest in your company. But I
Right.
think that is where that relationship already begins to fail.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Fintech Ki Baat. Today we have with us Mr. Nikhil Aggarwal, founder and CEO of Grip Invest. Nikhil is a second-time entrepreneur. I think before this he was also the founder of Chalo, and prior to that he has had a long and lustrous career in Morgan Stanley. So Nikhil, pleasure to have you here, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Shreyas, for having me on the podcast. It's a pleasure. You've hosted some really fantastic founders and some really interesting discussions about businesses. It's a great honor to be speaking with you and sharing a little bit more about myself and the business that we run.
Thank you so much, Nikhil. I think I'm super excited to learn about the world of alternate investing, and hopefully, I'll also be able to successfully demystify a few interesting concepts about it for our audiences. Uh, Having said that, over to you, Nikhil. Would love to hear about your journey from your own mouth, and would love to learn a bit more about you as well. Over to you.
Sure. Um, I think a very important part of my personal journey, and which I think has played out into my career as well, actually begins with my school
Mm-hmm.
life. And if I can rewind all
Okay.
the way back to it, I think the what was
Sure.
probably stood out was that ended up changing about 7 schools across 3 different
Oh,
cities.
wow.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
between class 1 to class 12, as my father changed jobs
Okay.
and moved from one place to
Mm-hmm.
another. The most common question I get is, was he in the army? And the answer was that he was not.
Mm-hmm.
He was in finance. But as a result of moving between cities, I got a chance to move
Mm-hmm.
across the country and across schools, and in each city develop a new set of friends, develop a new school. And I think a bit of entrepreneurship is like that, right? You're constantly thrown
Right.
into a new set of challenges, new situations,
Mm-hmm.
and you know unknowingly, that experience early in my childhood, I think, did a lot to also shape what I wanted to be later in my career. Anyway,
Okay.
finished schooling,
Interesting.
did my undergrad in
Mm-hmm.
economics, and then my
Mm-hmm.
MBA from FMS in finance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I
Awesome.
graduated in the same year as the world was hit with a global financial crisis. So it was always an interesting time to graduate from a
2008.
business school. 2000, yeah. So I graduated in 2009. Um, Obviously, the job
Okay.
market was very different than what any
At
of us
its
thought
lowest.
it
Yes.
would be when we
Mm-hmm.
started business school. But was fortunate
Mm-hmm.
enough coming out of FMS to get a job with HSBC Bank. I spent a year with them
Oh, great.
looking at
Mm-hmm.
the exact reason that caused the financial crisis, which was home loans. So my first job was in home
Right.
loans for HSBC. Spent year there thinking about strategy for credit,
Mm-hmm.
distribution, incentives for sales team, everything around building home loans as a strategy for HSBC.
Mm-hmm.
Subsequently, like you mentioned, I started a career in Morgan Stanley. This was as part of the investment banking
Right.
team, where I spent nearly
Mm-hmm.
6 years looking after
Oh.
capital markets, which is fundraising, as well as mergers and acquisitions
Mm-hmm.
for companies in technology, real estate, and automotive. I do think that Morgan Stanley,
Interesting.
in a lot of ways, shaped who I am as a professional. I was very fortunate to get
Mm-hmm.
incredible mentorship and leadership. Morgan Stanley was a global institution, but very strong,
Mm-hmm.
both from a finance perspective, but also in how they thought about culture, how they thought about treating the
Right.
client, how they thought about compliance,
Mm-hmm.
and having that as really one of my first jobs at 22 shaped how I
Mm-hmm.
thought about whatever was next in my career. I was fortunate to have managers. I had 3 managers, all 3 very different personalities, but each one of them
Mm-hmm.
enabled me to learn so much about how to conduct business, how to build a
Right.
successful client relationship. And I think that that
Mm-hmm.
experience was absolutely invaluable, especially in the soft skills that I learned at Morgan
I'm
Stanley.
sure.
Um,
I'm sure.
in
Mm-hmm.
2016, 2016, after 6 years at Morgan Stanley, I decided
Mm-hmm.
to start Chalo. It was in partnership with two other gentlemen, Vinayak and Mohit,
Mm-hmm.
and I was really excited by the prospect of what we could build at Chalo and the scale at which the problem existed for public transportation. For people who don't know,
True.
Chalo is a public app, a public mobility app. It helps
Mm-hmm.
commuters who are taking city buses to discover their bus and then to also take
Mm-hmm.
tickets on an easier basis and then commute better. Uh, Chalo is probably the
Right.
only city bus company that continues to survive. A lot of lot of competition over a period of time um, did not survive because of business models. We saw several pivots
True.
at Chalo, and I think credit to the team
Mm-hmm.
that continues to run it for being able to scale it into an exciting business. I personally,
Still
Shreyas,
in operation, right?
it's still in operation. Vinayak and Mohit, along with
Awesome.
other management team members, continue to run the business. I stepped out in
Mm-hmm.
2019 and moved to a
Mm-hmm.
role with the World Bank as a policy consultant for
Oh.
transportation and electric vehicles. The idea
Mm-hmm.
was to bring whatever limited understanding I had on private sector operations of buses into policy
Mm-hmm.
making and help the World Bank on some of its mandates. I think it was a
Understood.
very interesting change in my life. As a founder, you normally think of everything 1 quarter forward, 2 quarter forwards, maximum a year forward, right? Especially the early stage.
True.
But the World Bank thinks of everything in terms of decades, right? And just changing the lens of how you're looking at a problem
Mm-hmm.
was a very interesting experience for me. I ended up spending 2.5 years as a consultant to the World Bank and then also started
Mm-hmm.
Grip as my second venture. So that's been my career. I would call myself a finance professional who chanced upon mobility and has now rediscovered
Mm-hmm.
finance as a profession.
Perfect. Thank you for the lovely and elaborate introduction, Nikhil. I think this gives me a lot of insight into the career journey that you have had, and essentially, something that I've always observed in career journeys of founders, and what always intrigues me is that many of them, I would say a majority of them, essentially don't have a linear career path, right? Finance professional or probably an engineer turned into some completely different role, maybe a marketing role, and then from there the next role is again in something completely different. And all of those variety of experiences over a decade kind of gives you a holistic view of how business runs from multiple facets, and that essentially is when you get the confidence of becoming a founder when you're starting something of your own, because you understand the business from multiple facets, right? And I think I've observed this common thread in many founders as well. Having said that, Nikhil, let's dive right into the entrepreneurship journey. Our first segment called Entrepreneurship Ki Baat, and let's get straight to the first question. What essentially inspired you to start your own company? Right, I think Chalo was the first company that you founded. So, what inspired you to leave the cushy, comfortable corporate life at your organization that you're working at and kind of getting into the entrepreneurship?
Yeah. I first of all, Shreyas, what I agree with what you fully said before. I think life is a sum total
Mm-hmm.
of experiences. The more varied they are,
True.
the more learning opportunity it provides you, and the different facets you can bring together to a situation. I think that is what
Indeed.
allows us to have non-linear career, or a non-linear career graph allows you to create more such experiences. But I don't think it's limited to
Indeed.
career. I think if you put yourself out
Mm-hmm.
in uncomfortable situations, it could even be traveling to a
Mm-hmm.
country for a holiday that you're not necessarily comfortable with, right? You may be a beach
Right.
holiday person, but you put yourself in a
Mm-hmm.
mountain holiday, and you will discover something new about yourself, right? Because you will challenge yourself to differently
True.
in a different situation. And even that
True.
personal experience will serve you somewhere else in taking a decision or
Right.
looking at a situation. So I think the more experiences anyone can bring into their life, personal, professional, I think the more enriching it
Mm-hmm.
becomes, and then being able to sort of carve that into your journey. I think, on your
Definitely.
question on the entrepreneurial, Chalo was probably the first company that anyone heard about, but Chalo happened to be my
Mm-hmm.
third company. I started my
Oh,
first company when I was in undergraduation as an economics
I see.
honor student.
Mm-hmm.
This was in
Mm-hmm.
2005. The tsunami had just happened. For people who were
Right.
in college or school at that time, it was a very big event. It impacted a lot of us, and as college
Mm-hmm.
students, we wanted to contribute back to tsunami efforts. So the first
Mm-hmm.
company I started actually was an event management company in partnership with an NGO to raise money for the
Okay.
tsunami. And after a very
Wow.
successful rock um, concert, we then went on to spend a few
Mm-hmm.
more years doing events to raise money for social causes. My second company
Amazing.
was during my MBA years at FMS, where uh,
Mm-hmm.
we thought it would be important. We all saw US colleges have these alumni T-shirts like Harvard, Columbia,
Mm-hmm.
and we always wondered why we didn't
Right.
have enough of it in MBA schools.
Mm-hmm.
So
True.
a friend and I, we licensed the FMS alumni logo, and we started merchandising
Mm-hmm.
clothes and other merchandise from it. So we started, that was my
Oh,
second venture.
wow.
My third venture
Mm-hmm.
happened to be a food truck based in Gurgaon, which I started with a friend of mine who's now a colleague of mine at Grip. And
Damn.
we were we were both very passionate about hospitality and food, and we started a food truck called
Mm-hmm.
Something Saucy out of Gurgaon.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, each of them was such incredible learning experiences. And I look back and say,
I'm sure.
Something Saucy as a food truck happened before Swiggy came about.
Hmm.
Damn, I really missed that opportunity to say that I could have solved for food tech very differently. Or
True.
the clothing brand at FMS happened before Mintra happened. I wish I had seen what
Right.
tech could have done to that journey and made it so much bigger.
Hmm.
So I think, again, to your point,
Definitely.
they're just experiences that enrich you as a professional. But Chalo was, yes,
Mm-hmm.
was the I think at a much larger scale, obviously something that continues to happen. And I would like to
True.
believe that somewhere that entrepreneurship kida always existed. There was always a desire to build
Mm-hmm.
something, and I think the motivation even today remains to say, can you build something that will outlast you? Can you create an institution not for the next 5
Right.
years or 10 years or 20 years of your life, but can you create something and establish it in a manner with the right processes, people, right fundamentals that will establish a brand name? Um, you know, like Coca-Cola, right?
Mm-hmm.
Apple. These are institutions.
Right.
Morgan Stanley. How can you build something like that?
True.
I think that is what personally drives me to think about entrepreneurship and to then set up companies.
Interesting. And I think what really I found interesting is that you have been doing something of your own ever since I think you were in undergrad. And जैसे आपने कहा वो एक entrepreneurship का जो कीड़ा रहता है that essentially is there from the beginning and it wanted to manifest in some or the other way, and ultimately I think it manifested in different areas. And here again, what I see and what I really appreciate is the fact that it's again non-linear, right? From a merchandising company to a food truck to a mobility startup to now back to the roots of financial investment startup. This kind of gives you a whole new set of life experiences, I think, which is really important to all of us as humans as well. And definitely helps out a lot when you're building something of your own at a larger scale. All of these experiences do come together. So great. I think this was really an inspiring journey. Let's talk a bit about Grip moving forward. When do we when essentially you started Grip? I think back in 2020, if I'm not wrong.
That's right.
So
Yes.
so I mean, it must have been first few months have been always been are always challenging for early stage founders. When essentially did you feel that yaar ye to ab chal pada, now there is no looking back, like this grip is going to run, it has got its grip?
Yeah, I think there was, and I still, that's you've got a question. I think the first few months are always surrounded by tremendous uncertainty of whether
Mm-hmm.
what you think as a need and a product is going to be something that other
Right.
people relate to. I
Mm-hmm.
remember in about 4 5 months, we had got
Mm-hmm.
to doing 10 lakh rupees of investments or facilitating 10 lakh rupees of investments every day. And we saw
Oh wow.
that happen every day consistently for an entire month. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember this was in December 2020, messaging one of our angel investors and saying,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we are doing 10 lakhs a month, 10 lakhs a day consistently.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be something to this because
Right.
we are a 4 month old platform with which hasn't yet proven itself, and yet there
Mm-hmm.
are people who are ready to invest 10 lakhs, which is substantial, right? And this is not one person but many people,
True.
and consistently.
Of course.
If we are
Mm-hmm.
seeing this sign, then there at least means that the demand or the need that we anticipated does exist.
Mm-hmm.
It is now up to us
Right.
to get the execution right. But the demand or the addressable market is in place for us to build on. I think that
Mm-hmm.
was the first moment, and I still recall it and remember it as the time when I felt, okay, fine, this makes sense to do.
Makes sense. Interesting. So let's take a step back. I think that is obviously a very great validation saying कि दिन के 10 लाख अगर आप at that stage if you're facilitating, that essentially means you are facilitating somewhere around 3 crores a month at a very early stage. I mean, that's something really a decent amount of volume that an early stage startup would essentially crave for. So this brings me to a question that a lot of early stage founders kind of grapple with, and I think I still get a lot of questions from whenever I meet any founder who's building a startup and is at kind of a early stage. Ki, how do you optimize CAC when you're in a B2C model? What's the best way to acquire customers without burning money purely on digital marketing? And what
Yeah.
has been your experience like on this?
I will also ask the same question of you. I think that I'm still looking for the answer, and I think we've taken some
Mm-hmm.
hard knocks and hard learnings to develop our own version of
Mm-hmm.
the answer, right? The
Mm-hmm.
so I'll say one thing, Shreyas. I think no journey of any company is identical. I think that whatever
True.
advice someone may give and whatever I may say, everyone should take it with
Mm-hmm.
a pinch of salt to say मेरी क्या journey थी, मेरा क्या situation था, what were
Right.
my resources. But I'll tell you our version of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think
Of
there is
course.
no alternative to building a great product. Okay? And
True.
the more, I think one of the mistakes I feel we did was we had this sense कि यार जल्दी बनाना है, okay? Speed, speed,
Mm-hmm.
speed, because you want to scale very fast. And when I
Right.
look back, right, I feel कि
Mm-hmm.
there are some industries जिसमें there is nothing like winner takes all. We hear this term very commonly.
Right.
I think there are a lot of industries in which winners don't necessarily take all. Our industry is
True.
one such industry, right? Financial
Mm-hmm.
service में अगर आप देखें, there are
Mm-hmm.
50 mutual funds, okay, 50 large mutual funds.
Right.
There are many large
Right.
private banks, and hence there will be many investment platforms. There are already
Indeed.
so many platforms for stock market investing. So one of the
Mm-hmm.
things I feel we should have invested more in is getting the product even better at that time. And if
Mm-hmm.
there's a founder out there or
Mm-hmm.
founders out there thinking about their business and saying, should I
Mm-hmm.
optimize for scale? Should I just scale very quickly? Or should I invest in building a
Mm-hmm.
better product? If you are in a market which
Right.
allows multiple participants, build for a better product.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What it allows
Makes
is
sense.
tremendous referral, okay? Tremendous customer referral. And there is no better
Right.
way to build with lower CAC than customer referral. Okay? When we started
Perfect.
off,
Makes sense. Mm-hmm.
70 or 80% of our business came from customer referral. Okay? And we had almost no
Mm-hmm.
CAC in the first year, almost zero CAC, right? I think
Wow.
when we decided after the first year, okay, now product market fit आ गया है, इसको scale करते हैं, We started spending money on customer acquisition. I wish we had gone back then and said, let's spend all that money in product improvement. Even if we are growing slowly,
Mm-hmm.
we will build it in a
Mm-hmm.
completely organic manner, or almost, largely
True.
organic manner.
Right. Makes sense. Makes sense. So I think this is a really valuable takeaway. Uh, जो specifically एक जो sense of urgency होता है in early stage founders की फटाफट बना के I need to go to market, quick go to market, right? And that is what also they pitch to their VCs की we are going to have a really quick GTM, this, that, and raise money basis that. That essentially ends up compromising somewhere on the product experience or the product quality, which ultimately, as you said, organic growth, the way you guys got it through the referral piece, which might again the compromise on that specific variable.
I'll just,
Uh,
there's a constant
mhm,
debate about perfect product versus faster go to market.
mhm,
Okay. And
true.
please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you must build the perfect product, right? But I think
Right.
that there's always वो चॉइस बनानी पड़ती है कि आप कितना प्रोडक्ट पे इन्वेस्ट करोगे एंड कितना फास्ट मार्केट पे जाओगे. आई आई थिंक
Mhm,
most of the times I have seen founders go to market faster. I have seen
right.
more experienced founders, second time, third time founders, go for better product and delay go to market by maybe a
Mhm,
couple of months, right? I'm not saying you have to
mhm,
perfect the product, but I think spending a little
of
bit more
course.
time on product does solve for much more,
Mhm,
in my opinion.
makes sense. Makes sense. Having said that, right, I think one other problem that a lot of founders also kind of grapple with at this early stage is essentially finding the right set of investors. Any basically tips or tricks essentially that you have in how do you identify the right set of investors to be your first investors? Because what we essentially have observed is if you get the wrong kind of investors onboarded early on, then you are basically doomed. If you basically wrong set of expectations ho gaye, wrong kind of money coming in, that puts the wrong kind of pressure on the company as well, and then everything else is kind of off the track. So how did
Yeah,
you manage that, or how do you advise like early aspiring entrepreneurs to go about this?
actually, Shreyas, आपके question में ही answer है, because the problem is about
Mm-hmm.
expectations. Okay, as
Right.
founders, and I have been in that boat, unquestionably,
Mm-hmm.
when you're pitching to an investor, the investor often
Mm-hmm.
has his own thought process. He has his own biases. They have their own set of
Mm-hmm.
experience, and
True.
they sometimes, as a founder, you sometimes start saying what they want to hear, okay? Because you want
Right.
them to invest in your company. But I
Right.
think that is where that relationship already begins to fail. A founder today,
Mm-hmm.
in at least early stage companies, knows best, and most importantly, he knows what he wants to build. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I think being honest and setting the right expectations with an investor, even if it takes more
Mm-hmm.
time to find that investor, will ensure that the both parties, the investor and the founder, are coming to the table with the same expectation, right? Over a period of
Makes
time,
sense.
they can then take that journey together to say, ये मेरा
Mm-hmm.
initial thesis था, आपने भी,
Mm-hmm.
आपका भी same initial thesis था, but here's a new set of information. We both must change our thesis, right? But when you enter
Right.
building a business with someone else's thesis
Mm-hmm.
just because you gave money, A, you will never be fully
Mm-hmm.
committed, and B,
True.
it was never your thesis in the first place, right? You are building to solve just
Exactly.
to appease someone. So I think that to me is the number
Mm-hmm.
one factor that founders should keep in mind and set the right expectations of what they believe they should build, and then
Mm-hmm.
you will go through a journey to discover it. Everything else, I think, is secondary to this piece of selection for an investor. After that, you need to make sure, obviously, that they have the same sort of culture, they have the right amount of money to give you,
Mm-hmm.
they understand the industry. But irrespective,
Makes sense.
set the right expectation on day one, like you would for an employee, like you would for your spouse. I think it's important to set the right
Mm-hmm.
expectation for your investor.
Perfect. Perfect. I think that is brilliantly answered. Having said that, let's get on to the next step of the journey, right? I mean, you have been building Grip now for almost 4 years. what has been the most humbling part of your journey till now that kind of challenged everything that you knew about entrepreneurship and fintech?
That challenged everything I knew about.
That challenged everything that you knew about entrepreneurship and fintech or finance.
Sure. Lots of examples immediately jumping to my mind, but I'll try to I'll pick one that I
Mhm,
think we are
mhm,
um, most obsessed about today.
mhm,
In a Coming from the background that I come from and that several of my colleagues
mhm,
come from, finance is
mhm.
fairly, for the lack of better word, a jargonized industry. We like to
Right.
make things complicated, and financial services products are have their complications, right? There's a lot of legal language, there's a lot of technical language.
Mhm,
Communicating that product into the language of a customer who can truly appreciate
mhm.
it, while at the same time not compromising on a responsibility for transparency and accuracy, has been the
Right.
largest challenge for me as an entrepreneur. Okay? How do I communicate a product that I am so excited about in a
Mhm.
language that does not overwhelm my customer? Okay. And
True.
how do I do
Mhm.
this without having manual intervention? Right? We are a digital
Right.
tech platform. We are not a feet on street model. We don't have branches.
Mhm.
How do I communicate all of that simplified language to you on a customer when
Right.
you're going to give me 30 to 45 seconds of your time over the internet, on your mobile phone, on your net, on a YouTube video? That has challenged
Mhm.
everything that I have done till today, in finance, in marketing, in customer acquisition, to be able to simplify.
Makes sense. No, I think that is probably the toughest job because getting something so complex like the products that are essentially there in the financial industry and making it what do you say, understandable for someone who is investing in that is normally a layman, right? So kind of
Yeah.
conveying that is, I think, a huge challenge. And I think you guys have done it pretty well. I have seen a few of the videos that you guys have put out and also have invested in your products. I think they have been pretty well. I mean, they have been pretty well explained in many documentations and cases. So yeah, kudos to you
No,
guys on that.
you run a fintech podcast. I trust you have a much better understanding of it. But most of us were scared of maths in school.
Hmm.
Over a period of time,
Right.
our ability to think about numbers has actually reduced because we are so dependent on our mobiles, on our
Hmm.
laptops to do it. And the instant you see
True.
numbers, right, आप भाग जाते हो,
Hmm.
right? They're like, okay, let's stop. I don't want to know more. So how do
Right.
we communicate and simplify what we're selling? I always
Hmm.
tell my team, we're not selling soap. हम biscuit नहीं बेच रहे. But we need to
Bilkul.
communicate and make it as simple as a pack of
Hmm.
biscuits.
True. I think that's a great strategy to kind of make this product adopted by the masses. And yeah, having said that, right, let's move on to the next piece, wherein let's talk a bit about the early days of you building Grip. How essentially, I mean, it's always, I think, it's been common knowledge that being a founder is not the easiest job in the world, right? I mean, although it's over glorified by the media, but it's probably one of the toughest jobs that you can get yourself into because you are you are wholly responsible for anything that goes wrong or right, and you don't have anyone else to blame. It's just the founders that are in the early days specifically. I think it's just the founders that are running it. So that, I mean, without kind of stating it, it's obvious that it comes with a lot of stresses, physical and emotional. So what is essentially your way of dealing with these kind of stresses when they come, and how do you kind of manage your mental health?
Yeah. No, I agree, and this is a topic that is not spoken about enough. But I think founders,
Hmm.
it's tough. I think I would like to say I think
True.
it's been easier for me having a great support system at home,
Hmm.
having a great support
Hmm.
system with my co-founders. But I do think that
Hmm.
it can be very, very tough for founders. We were able to raise capital very early in our journey, and that also made it easier. I think two
Indeed.
hacks that I have found. I think one is
Mm-hmm.
to look when you're having a bad day, right? And metrics nahi aa
Mm-hmm.
raha, you're expecting some performance today, you're expecting to win a contract, you're expecting to launch a product that's
Mm-hmm.
getting delayed. I think is to look at the
Right.
long term basics. Okay, कि जो मैं आज कर रहा
Mm-hmm.
हूँ or what my team is investing in,
Mm-hmm.
are we likely to win in the long run? We may
Right.
not be having success today, we may not have success tomorrow, but are my
Mm-hmm.
inputs and efforts going in the right direction? If I had to redo everything
Makes sense.
and choose again what I would do today, will I still decide to do the same actions? Okay. If that is
True.
correct,
True.
I should not be stressed,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because this is not a 100-meter race. Entrepreneurship is a 42-kilometer
Perfect.
marathon. I just need to think about,
Right.
am I doing it? Am I building the right things? I think this is number one thing that really helps me whenever I'm having a really shitty day. Okay. And
Perfect.
if I
Makes
realize
sense.
that something is not wrong, it also gives me a clear action point. Let's solve this, right? I think as
Mm-hmm.
a founder, you don't want to feel
Right.
helpless. You want to know कि अच्छा मेरे पास कुछ करने के
True.
लिए है which can change it. I think that's one. I think second is something
Right.
that I give credit to my wife for. Um,
Mm-hmm.
she's been an entrepreneur. She is also an entrepreneur today, and from her experience, she set
Mm-hmm.
some incredible ground rules for how we must disconnect from work at least for some part of our day, and to be able to
Right.
just recharge. Ground rules about
Mm-hmm.
come back from work x number of hours, we will have dinner together. On weekends we will try not to work, we'll make sure we take this much time off. So very
Mm-hmm.
very simple ground rules, encouraging me to make sure that you do whatever form of meditation. My form of meditation is exercise, but do whatever form of
Mm-hmm.
meditation. So I think those kind of things really helped me deal with the stress of entrepreneurship.
Perfect. No, I think that's really insightful. I've seen a lot of founders, specifically first-time founders, struggle with switching off once they are home, right? काम जब खुद पे ही हो सब कुछ तो वो चलते ही रहता है दिमाग में. And although I'm not a full-time founder as such, but ये podcast भी जब start किया था तो entire time दिमाग में वो excitement चलता रहता है कि how do I make it grow, क्या करना है, what can be done.
Yeah.
FOMO रहता है कि कुछ ना कुछ छूट जाएगा. So I think that is really important to kind of disconnect from those things and make it a bit more, what do you say, disconnected, have your own ways of meditation and all of that. I think you've perfectly put it. This brings me to the last question of the first segment. What are your top 3 takeaways for budding entrepreneurs? Top 3 don'ts.
Top three don'ts. um,
Yes.
I think firstly, get into entrepreneurship for the right reasons. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurship. When I joined Morgan Stanley in 2010, everyone wanted to be an investment banker, and I used to
Right.
tell everyone, "Here, investment banking is not the best career, not necessarily the best career in the world. The best career in the world is whatever you want to do in the world,
Mm-hmm.
right? Do not be
True.
excited by तब बहुत ना investment banker की movies आती थी, and investment banker
Mm-hmm.
used to be seen as this very rich, suave, sexy guy who would
Right.
get all the girls and all the money in the world, and everyone wanted to be an investment
True.
banker. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the same thing is happening today for founders. Okay, and I would just say,
Yes.
neither of these professions have to be for you. I think the first thing is pick entrepreneurship for the right reasons. Believe that you want to do
Right.
this with your life. There are hundreds of better things to do in your life,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that's number one.
True.
Number two is make sure you do not compromise on team. Okay, do not compromise on your
Mm-hmm.
co-founders. Do not compromise on the first set of people you have to hire. Whatever you
Right.
have to do to hire them, equity, cash, whatever your
Mm-hmm.
resources are, bring it all into play.
Right.
No company can be built by one person. All the companies that we see today as unicorns may have one person as a face, right? Which is a great
Mm-hmm.
marketing strategy, but they're always built by
Right.
incredible teams. Do not compromise,
Indeed.
even on day one. A lot of people I've seen say कि यार हम 3 फाउंडर है, हम ही बना लेंगे पहले 3-4 साल के लिए to keep cost low. Find a way to solve for
Right.
a middle management who will come and take you, otherwise you will not scale. Okay, most companies
True.
in my view
Mm-hmm.
die from between series A to series B when they do not scale. Zero to
Mm-hmm.
series A is still possible,
Right.
right? आप किस तरह survive कर लोगे. I think the third advice I would give to founders is what you asked me. You need to focus on yourself. Jab, when
Right.
we on flights and there's an emergency training or they give you protocol,
Mhm.
they first say put the life mask on
Mhm.
yourself, right? The oxygen mask,
Right.
and then help your passenger.
Mhm.
If you're not helping yourself
बिल्कुल.
during the journey, there is no way that you will be able to help your
Mhm.
colleagues or companies. So you need to take out time for
True.
yourself, your health, to make sure that you're in best of your shape. Disconnecting from work will give you such incredible ideas and showcase where your business is not working far more than when you are in the
Mhm.
execution, day-to-day execution of work. So those are the three things that I would advise to anyone who's looking at entrepreneurship.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nikhil. I think these were really insightful, and it was really an amazing conversation with you about your entrepreneurship journey in the first segment, the founder story. We'll just take a quick break and move on to the next segment shortly.